in studio right now to discuss his campaign and make one of those final pitches to the voters out there, at least before a runoff election, if there is a runoff election in this race, is Lubbock Mayor Glen Robertson. Welcome back.
Hi, glad to be here, Chad.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Of course, running for Texas 19 to replace Congressman Randy Neugebauer. This is a crowded field. Many people think that there will be a runoff. Right. What do you think your chances are of making that runoff?
You know, we feel good about a runoff. There's no doubt it's kind of coming down to three candidates. And today, I feel very confident we'll be in a runoff. As you know, though, we've got a lot of time until March 1st, and a lot of things can happen in these campaigns that you cannot anticipate. So I'm going to just keep doing the things I've been doing, keep working, and work all the way through March 1, and then we'll see what the results are. The
Lubbock newspaper gave their endorsement to one of your opponents.
Yes.
In fact, they did not even mention you in the article. Your name didn't even come up. Now, in the article, they said that because of your opponent's previous time in Washington, D.C., that gives him a leg up, and that makes him the most qualified. I assume you disagree with that, so why are they wrong?
Well, I think it's just obvious that AJ has been, and especially the last year or so, is an extremely liberal media outlet. They're very left of center. And, you know, the argument I would have with them is that, and I have no problems with Mr. Arrington, but he's what I'm running against, that old-style establishment elite in D.C. that is a good old boys club. And Jody's experience has been as a lifetime bureaucrat. I don't think that's what we need. I think we need proven leaders that have made hard decisions at the public level, that have a proven track record, aren't just talking about I've done this, this, and this, but can go back and show by votes and by actual numbers, I've actually reduced debt. I've voted against tax increases. I've always put the interest of the citizens of Lubbock before the special interest groups. So I understand that, like I say, the AJ is not real fond of me because I'm on the opposite side of the fence as they are. I'm as conservative a candidate as you can have in this race, and that's not what the Lubbock Avalanche Journal wants.
Is it something when you go around and you've been talking to voters, we've seen it nationally where the outsiders rule right now with the presidential race. I don't know if an editorial saying that, hey, he's been in Washington before necessarily helps out when the attitude of the voters, if the attitude of the voters is, we want an outsider. Right. Is that the attitude of the voter, in your opinion?
You know, I don't think so. I think the voters just want a strong individual that will be fiercely independent and won't sell out to either party, to the party leaders, and more importantly, won't sell out to the special interest and the lobbyist groups from K Street. So I think that's one of the reasons we're seeing the surge in Trump and some other folks, not so much that he's an outsider, but the fact that he's saying what a lot of people are thinking, and he's not afraid to be outspoken. This political correctness world that we're in today is killing us at all levels of government.
Visiting with Glen Robertson, candidate for Texas 19, a question that came in via the text line. Your opinion on auditing the Federal Reserve or abolishing it completely?
Well, you know, I think we do need to audit. There's no doubt about it. They manipulate our currency rates. They manipulate interest rates. They're set up not to help the citizens but to help the very large banks. And there's a problem. You cannot have federal agencies that are set up to actually operate against the interest of the citizens. My opinion, the Federal Reserve does that. They cater to the big banks. That was proven in the bailout and all of the TARP funds and everything that we've seen the last 8 to 10 years. So, yes, we need to audit them. We need to reduce the size and scope of the Federal Reserve as well as all administrative agencies.
Where do you think we're heading with the current economy the way it is?
I think we're in trouble. I think the U.S. economy is staggering again. If you watch the fluctuations of the stock market this year, the ups and the drastic swings, the fact that we've got oil actually in a crisis mode right now. We've got ag out here in West Texas in crisis. And we've got policies that are forcing businesses to make tough decisions. They're outsourcing. They're taking their manufacturing offshore. We're producing very little in this country, and we've got to start changing those policies, incentivize people to reinvest back in the United States, and quit moving jobs and manufacturing offshore.
I had a drive-by who asked, and it's a good question, your view on Social Security and I guess the future of Social Security, which is something that has been a big topic.
Social Security is insolvent today. Mm-hmm. It's we started in the 60s, removing all of the money out of the Social Security fund, putting it in the general fund. The minute that happened, they started spending that money on pet projects. We've got to come up with a 10 to 15-year plan, and it won't happen overnight. But we've got to come up with a well-thought-out strategic plan to make Social Security solvent again. Now, the people that are my age, I'm 57, we're concerned. I've been paying in Social Security my entire life since I was 15 years old. I expect that money to be there when I retire, but today I'm very concerned that it will be.
What are, if elected, what are maybe the top 3 priorities for you once you get to Washington, D.C.?
Well, number one, as a freshman congressman, your first priority better be to get up there and establish yourself as the hardest working man on Capitol Hill. Your second priority better be to start building coalitions, to start earning the respect of your fellow legislators. And you do that by not lying to them, not blindsiding them, but by standing firm on the principles and values that you believe in. Past that, it's got to be the red meat issues that everybody's talking about: national security, securing the border, $19 trillion in debt, reforming the tax policy, replacing Obamacare with a free market-based solution. You know, we could sit here and literally talk for days and days and days about the many issues that we face as a country. Mm-hmm. So I think to be effective, the first thing you've got to do is get up there. And we've got an advantage. We don't have a Democratic opponent. If I'm elected, I'll be in D.C. in front of people, in front of Mike Thornberry, in front of Mike Conaway, all the Texas delegation. Building those relationships, you've got a 7-month head start. So I think it's incumbent on whoever is elected to get up there early, start working, start building those relationships so that when you hit the ground in January, you're hitting the ground running. If
you have a question for Lubbock Mayor Glen Robertson running for Texas 19, feel free to give us a call. Let's go ahead and get to the phones before our first break. And James, you're on with Glen Robertson.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing well.
Hey, I guess my question is just kind of goes to the subject of humility and perhaps arrogance. I felt like the response of the city during the snowstorm was very, very lacking. And what I was most disappointed in was Mayor Robertson's conclusion that basically the city responded perfectly. And that just really bothered me because I think it speaks to character and arrogance. And I want to know what the mayor has to say about that.
Well, James, I appreciate it. Number one is I never said we responded perfectly. We did not. There is no doubt that we failed in a couple of areas. The first place we failed miserably was in communicating with the citizens. We had 5 different public information officers. They were not coordinated together. We had a lack of leadership at that time with the city manager out of town and the deputy city manager choosing to stay home and not be at the EOC. We did not handle that situation perfectly, there's no doubt. Now, we did do a good job that first 18 hours of saving lives, which was our number one priority. Once we got past that, with the limited manpower and limited equipment we had, while we did not do a great job, we did absolutely the best we could under the circumstances of a historic storm and being a city that is not prepared with the proper equipment and the proper manpower to handle that type of storm.
Well, I appreciate your response.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your question. I mean, that was a tough week, a very tough issue, and we got through it the best we could. I hope we learned a lot of lessons. I hope the next time, because there will be a next time. I hope Lubbock's better prepared in the future.
James, thank you very much.
Thank you.
How does something like that, not that Congress necessarily can control blizzards or fix blizzards, but how does something like that prepare you for Congress in your mind?
Well, situation is that you're thrown in as mayor to have to make decisions that's really not your job. Mm-hmm. I had to stand up and make calls that, quite frankly, weren't mine, and tried to lead a group in the EOC in making sure that we prioritized and that our number one priority was saving lives and making sure that our first responders could get to patients, that our electric grid stayed up. Our biggest fear during that whole thing was that we would lose the entire grid. Mm-hmm. If that would have happened, it would have been catastrophic. Just having to deal with not only the circumstances that surrounded that storm, but then the heat afterwards. Because what you got to understand, when you're an elected official, you have to be willing to take the criticism and the heat. And I've taken a lot over that storm, and I accept that criticism because it's my job as mayor to do so. A lot of people are going to have to learn that lesson the hard way if they're elected. It's tough. It's hard to make decisions at the public level because you're always having to weigh the interest of the common good versus the interest of personal, private rights. And, that's what we struggled in the EOC. We were having to try to protect the common good of the city of Lubbock. And that inconvenienced a lot of people personally and privately.
Visiting with Glen Robertson, candidate for Texas 19. If you have a question, feel free to give us a call, 770-5790, toll-free, 1-800-687-0790. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Glen Robertson in studio. Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Lubbock Mayor Glen Robertson in studio discussing his campaign for Texas 19. It is the first day of early voting, and I know a lot of people will be heading out to the polls this week. Let's head back to the phones. Another question. And Bill, you're on with Lubbock Mayor Glen Robertson.
Yes, thank you for having my call. I just wanted to ask Glenn, when he gets up there to Washington, what do you think about continuing this CRP program that takes cropland out of production and just pays money to millionaires out here that probably just inherited land anyhow?
Well, I tell you, it's a great question, and the Farm Bill, in my opinion, has got a lot of issues, and one of them is the fact that 80% of it goes to food stamp, 5% goes to actual subsidies, 6% goes to programs like the CRP program, and then 8% goes to an insurance program. I think what we need to do with ag is the same as we need to do with all other businesses, including oil, is we've got to come up with a 10 to 15-year plan to level the playing field. We've got to make it to where our growers can compete against Brazil, India, and China, governments that are subsidizing their growers. We've got to get out of these terrible trade policies that we're in because of the World Trade Organization, fix the core issues, which are bad trade policies, bad tax policies, and overreaching regulations. If we can get that done, then we should be able to have our growers compete on a level playing field and not require any type of subsidies or entitlements. I don't agree with paying somebody to not produce. I can never get on that side of the argument.
That program was a total failure. It was meant to take cropland out of production, which would raise prices for other commodities. And look where cotton is today.
I will tell you, every policy we've had in the Farm Bill for the last 30 years has been a total failure. And my concern with it is we keep trying the same tactics and expecting different results. We've got to change our attitude, and we've got to realize that if you're going to talk about entitlements, we have to talk about all entitlements, and we can't put one group in a special group and say that we're going to treat them differently. Now, we've got to fix those core problems and get them to where they can compete fairly before we can take those away.
Bill, thanks for your call.
All right, thank you.
Have a good one out there. What do you think are the issues that aren't being talked about right now that voters should be taking more of a look at going into the future, and what you'll be taking a look at if elected?
I think one of the key issues is entitlement reform. What we do is we always want to treat the symptoms, and we never go and look at the core problems. And I argue that part of our entitlement system is a core problem in a lot of these other issues we talk about. It affects immigration. We've got illegal immigration because we have incentivized our citizens to not work. So therefore, we have jobs that we can't fill. And so we've created a magnet for people to come into this country illegally. These entitlement programs are also a big problem with our tax policy. We've got more than 50% of the country living off the other 48%. The only way we can reform the tax code is to reform these entitlement policies. So, I think we've got to start drilling down deeper. We've got a lot of candidates that are what I call a mile wide and an inch deep. They've got just enough quick one-line answers on all these topics, but we've got to start drilling down to the core issues. And the core issues are entitlement, bad trade policies, bad tax policies, $19 trillion in debt. How do we get away from that? And that's what concerns me in these races. We always talk about Band-Aids. We always talk about treating symptoms. We never start talking about the really core problems. And I think that's what separates me from everybody else in this race. I understand that, this entitlement culture that we're on right now is hurting us in virtually every one of these other issues that we constantly talk about.
Visiting with Lubbock Mayor Glen Robertson, candidate for Texas 19. The last time we had you on the show, we talked about term limits. Mm-hmm. And there are many who have come out, or some who have come out in favor of term limits. Others have said no term limits. You were, I think, for term limits.
Always have been.
Yesterday I was listening to a town hall with presidential candidate Marco Rubio, and he said there's no way Congress will ever pass term limits because that's their job and they don't want to phase it out. He said instead people need to support the Convention of States, right, which Governor Greg Abbott is supporting. Where do you come down on that?
Well, I would love to see us have a Convention of States. There again, mathematically, I don't think it's ever going to happen. You've got to get 2/3 of the states to agree to do it. Then it's going to take 3/4 to ratify. I think you could get term limits passed in Congress. Now, you're going to have to backdoor it in, which is terrible. But I think if you put forward legislation to pass term limits on Congress members, but if you grandfathered the existing ones that were in office, it's the only way, because these men and women, you're right, they're up there, they're fattening their own wallets, they're fattening their friend's wallet, they love the lifestyle. You're never going to get them to vote against their own personal interest. But if you could give them an option to vote against it where maybe over a 20-year period through attrition we could get there, I think you could get that legislation passed.
If you win and you get to Washington, D.C., and let's say you've been there 5 terms, mm-hmm. But you still haven't accomplished what you want to accomplish, how do you sell to the people in this district, give me another term?
Well, I think at that point, if we haven't passed term limits, then we have to let it be up to the voters. We've got a system of a seniority-based system in D.C., and the longer you're there, the more good you can do for your district and for the country. As a result of that, we've got to make term limits effective on everybody. What we need to do, what would really solve the problem, is if we'd start voting at better than a 10 or 11%. If we'd start voting at 50 to 60% of the eligible voters, we'd have automatic term limits. But the problem is that's not the fact today. And so until we can get term limits passed, it'll have to be up to the voters.
In the next 30 to 40 seconds, tell people why they need to vote for you.
Well, I think it's just a difference in backgrounds. 38 years of private business experience, 25 years of public service. I'm not making broad generality claims. I'm pointing out what I've done with facts. There's good men and women in this race, but I believe I'm the best one. Go to glenforcongress.com, 1N. You can learn more about the campaign.
All right. As always, Glen Robertson, thank you very much.
Thank you.